I've been in many bridal parties where the person will come to me before they walk down the aisle and they will say, I'm making a mistake. And I'll
Mm,
say, you don't have to do it. And they'll do it anyway. And so it kind of brings up this idea of moving forward versus moving backward, whatever that means to you. And I think sometimes on the goal line of life, it looks like we're moving forward when we make these choices, when kind of like, moving too fast, you have to clean up a mess. It's really you're moving backwards if you're not making the right choices for you. So for me, I've constantly been committed to growing. I've constantly been committed to myself. I've really enjoyed life. I'm probably one of the happiest people I know. Like it's
mm,
so rare for me to feel sadness because when I do, I let it be there. I
mm.
process it, I sit with it. And so I think in my love life, I've really held for what I want. And I feel myself the closest that I've ever been to having that.
Mm.
And yeah, it's been really beautiful to let myself have that. And I froze my eggs recently so that I wouldn't feel any biological pressure.
Oh my
That was a
goodness.
real doozy, freezing your eggs.
Can we just get into that? Because I
Yeah.
feel like in the stage of life that we are, right? You've reached several pinnacles of success in various ways. You launched your book a year ago, which was incredible, and it is phenomenal in really understanding your own U-turn back to yourself. So I love that. Yet now, we have this opportunity to freeze our eggs and actually have the freedom and like you're saying, the weight
Yeah.
of not thinking that every relationship needs to lead in a certain direction because of a certain time
Right.
clock.
But injecting yourself with hormones, getting acne, being bloated, and being in a new relationship, this guy that I'm seeing, I mean, what a saint. Like literally like took a video, all the videos you'll see on Instagram are taken by a guy I've been dating for 2 months. Like
Oh
bless.
my gosh. Wait, so
Yeah.
how was that conversation? Did you tell this person that you were, getting this whole thing
Well, that's
done?
the thing. There's so much shame around it, right? Like women
There
don't even want to
is.
talk about their eggs after age 30. It's so not the look.
Right.
But
Nobody wants to talk about that.
yeah, like early into dating him, like I was just like, yeah, I'm thinking about freezing my eggs. So I'm going to the doctor. And then when we were actually in it, it was happening, and he was in town. And I'm like, okay, so this is my hormone injections. And then I just came undone and was like, I don't even care. I'm going to talk about my period and my eggs all day long at this point. Cause if you freeze your eggs, all you're going to think about for 3 weeks is your fucking eggs, which is so weird. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of women talk about it as an emotional experience. A lot of women that I know have talked about like it being very much a symbol for them not being where they want to be. But my belief about life is that all these timelines are made up. And yes, biology is real. And yes, optimal science with our body and harmonious, pieces of our life puzzle can be easier when we choose to have a kid at a younger age, perhaps on a biological level. But I do feel like for me, there wasn't any of that drama or sadness around egg freezing. I didn't have that energy towards it at all. I
Mhm.
really treated it like routine blood work, like, oh, I got to get this done.
Okay.
And I didn't really relate. And that's the thing with life, right? Like how you relate to the issue is the issue. And
Hmm.
so I
What do
was
you mean
not
by
really,
that? Can you
yeah,
can
like
you can you
how
repeat that?
you relate to a problem in your life, that's the real problem, right? Like I related to my egg freezing like it was just something I was looking forward to getting done versus this like emotional, emoting, leaky thing. And I don't say that to judge the people who go through something with it because I very much get the realness of that. But for me personally, that just wasn't the relationship I was choosing with it. And I get that sometimes you don't choose it, you just feel how you feel.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, for me, it was really interesting. I went in, I got some blood work. So anyone who's thinking about freezing their eggs, I would recommend at least see what your AMH levels are, which those of you who don't even know what that means, I don't even know what that stands for, but it's a number that lets the doctor know where you're at with your fertility. I
Oh,
think that's
okay.
empowering. Like
Because they
anyone,
do say, I mean, I wanted to just kind of stand by you for a second. They do say that if you're after 40, that they don't recommend you freezing your eggs
yeah, yep,
because
exactly.
it's not as viable. And so your sweet spot is literally under
before
40.
35. Mm-hmm,
Before
mm-hmm.
35 is the sweet spot. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, under 40 is like the necessary spot. Before 35 is the sweet spot. Obviously, the younger the better, but I think one of the most empowering things I thought about for women in general was, or also women in partnership who want to have kids, there's a couple of things. Number one, checking your fertility levels. Like, what is your AMH? Go to your fertility doctor. If you don't have one, get a referral and at least give yourself that gift of awareness. Like, just knowing where you're at. Are you on par for your age?
AMH levels. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Get your blood test done. Another thing is a genetic test. So actually 23andMe, if you check the health option, gave me the same results as my genetic test that the fancy fertility people did.
Oh, wow.
So most people have 3 or 4 recessive genes that impact their outcome of their offspring. And when coupled with another person, if that other person has the same recessive flaw, it can be a really high risk situation. And you want to be educated on it. Obviously, being, not a doctor, I really don't know much about how that works. What I do understand is you can get a test to figure out what your genetic defects are, and you can have your partner do the same. And then the third thing I learned through a lot of friends, just witnessing them go through IVF and through conversations with my doctor, is also around just fertility in general as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Half the time it's not the woman, it's the man who has something going on. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think we live in a culture where you think fertility and you think the woman if she can't have a baby,
Yeah.
but it takes two to tango. Fertility is really an equation of two people. Maybe one person has weaker fertility and one person has stronger fertility, and together they're very fertile. So it just
Mm-hmm.
depends. But those are a few points that I think are not being talked about that I found really valuable for me to know. After
Mm.
getting my blood work, we set a date, and usually it's your first day of your period. You pay for the egg freezing. It's usually 6 to 10K just to freeze your eggs, and then 2 to 6K for medication. So it
Okay.
can go anywhere from 10 to 20K. It's expensive.
Wow. How did you
It's
pick your doctor?
Yeah, I just took a referral. And that was one of the things. Was one of my friends, one of our friends in LA, was like, this is the best doctor, but the person wasn't, their office wasn't answering the phone.
Mm.
And now when I think about how unacceptable that is for a fertility office not to answer the phone, here's why. When you are going through the egg freezing process, you have to call them and go to the office every other day. So you call them when you get your period. You have to be able to get a hold of them within 24 hours, because that's when you start the process. That's when you go to the office. They take blood work every other day from there.
Wow.
And to have a fertility doctor that wasn't picking up the phone for me to at least schedule my first appointment, and I tried 3 times,
Oh my
red
gosh.
flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So read reviews, ask around. People have a lot of communication around, like, there's how good is the doctor as far as how on it are they with the process? How many eggs do they get out of you? How many are viable? There's also how good is the doctor that you can't find out until later of how many of those eggs take if you end up unfreezing them and using them. So
Mm-hmm.
doctors have reputations, but I think it's all kind of a shit show, shot in the dark. And you really just have to do the best you can. My biggest message, though, to women around this is, and again, I'm no expert, but just having gone through it, is like, don't let the block of like, who do you go to, stop you from getting the information. Go to any fertility doctor to at least get your AMH levels and, your blood test. You don't need to commit to, and a lot of them offer a free consult first without
Mm.
you. And part of that consult is your blood work. I believe they need to get that to give you information on whether, they can move forward with
It's the
you.
right process for you. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, as somebody who's not an expert in it, it was definitely an intense experience for 2 weeks. It's definitely not nothing. I think women think of egg freezing like it's like a quick stop at Starbucks, and it's not. It's from the day, you go a month before the period cycle that you want to freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day you get your period, you call them, you come in, you get your blood done, and they let you know what night to start doing hormone injections. Ideally, you've already gone to a pharmacy and spent a ton of money on these hormone injections and learned from your doctor and an appointment how to inject them. And then every other day, you're scheduled to go back over to your doctor for new blood work and an ultrasound for them to look at your ovaries, look at your follicles, which are sacs of water holding your eggs,
Wow.
and assess how the medication is working, if you need to increase it or decrease it. So you do that for like 5 to 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And based on how that's going, they decide which day they're going to retrieve the eggs from you. Um, And when they do that, some of the eggs are not going to be viable. So, I'm very much a normal 34-year-old woman. So they were expecting around 15 eggs. I
Mhm.
got 13. All of them were viable. That's super rare. So
Wow.
they were surprised that all of them were useful, and mature enough to be used. So these are all things to know. Apparently, the magic number is like 20 plus eggs to have one kid. At my age, you want to have at least 20 as like a slam dunk. So I'm
Wow.
probably gonna do it again. And
Wow.
it's interesting because you get bloated and hormonal and all these weird things from it for 2 weeks. You
Yeah.
can't drink, you can't have caffeine, you can't exercise. It's a weird time.
So, and because it seems so tactile. How is the emotional processing, the mental processing, the spiritual elements? Did any of that, come at you as you're kind of doing this entire process, and what came up?
My best friend was doing it at the same time as me, and she had all of that, and I didn't. And I was like, "What am I like? This like fertility hard ass? Like, why do I?" But it just wasn't where my emotional deposits were. Like, I very much have a belief that I'm going to conceive naturally and have a really happy family. So for me, I think because of that belief, I was like, "Oh, this is just an insurance policy for me." Um,
I love that you
but
just reframed it that way. Just an insurance
yeah,
policy.
yeah,
Mm.
and you know, I've heard from countless women now when I posted that highlight on my Instagram who were like, wow, I had no idea what you just showed on here is what it looks like. And I had women who did IVF who explained to me that this is the first half. The first half is doing the egg retrieval, just like you're about to freeze your eggs, but instead they retrieve the eggs and then they, create embryos, which is putting a sperm with the egg. And then there's viable embryos, and then they implant the embryo, and then that's IVF. So it's like, it was very educational for me to see what we go through. But on a spiritual level, what was interesting was, I don't understand much about ovulation, but ideally, the day you ovulate, in your cycle is the day that they retrieve your eggs. They're basically injecting hormones every other day, doing the blood work and the ultrasound to see how it's going. And you're harvesting eggs. They're forcing your follicles, all these eggs, to grow. So you're like the spring chicken of fertility. About to like give out these eggs. But what was so interesting for me was looking on the ultrasound and seeing like 13 dots. And they were like, this is your right ovary, this is your left ovary. Oh, wow, your right ovary has 8 eggs, and your left one has 3. And my friend who was freezing her eggs, she only had 2 eggs. And when you look at how many could be viable, maybe none of them would be by the time she retrieves. There's also, they could see 10 on the ultrasound, and you can retrieve 20. Like, they'll find more on the day
Wow.
of your retrieval. So there's just so much uncertainty and money that goes into it that I was very much in the doing, and I didn't have an emotional aftermath. I don't enjoy injecting myself with hormones, and it wasn't that painful. Most people ask about the needles. I don't
Hmm.
have a needle thing. The needles are thin and short, so it wasn't a big deal for me. Um, but yeah, I think what was spiritually interesting was realizing if I ever use these eggs, that those are I've been shedding eggs my whole life, right? Like, as
Right.
women, we all are. And
Yes.
these are the 13 that will maybe be my family. And the odds of these
Mm.
13 eggs being pulled out of me for this use, I found really interesting, and thought, wow, these are like possible humans, right here. So it gave me a lot of respect for the human body and reverence for what my body does. It made me think a lot about my diet and how I take care of everything going on in there, because there's nothing quite like a little ultrasound, showing you your body to
Right.
remind you we are what we eat, and food is medicine. So,
So, such a powerful way to have us fully connect back to
yeah.
our source and our source of
Yep.
everything.
See you next time at the Brave Table.